jump in and start learning about all the brushes and how the sculpting engine inside of Blender is going to help us achieve our final finished result here. So I'm ready to start sculpting on my hammerhead shark, and I'm super excited. This is my favorite part. I love sculpting. It's a tremendous amount of fun. And there's some details of some of the brushes that I want you guys to be aware of that's going to make you a more efficient sculptor. And I'm going to start by examining the good old-fashioned Sculpt Draw brush. It's the first icon inside of your row. If you look carefully at all of the brushes, doesn't matter which one they're in, here's a great little trick. Look right here in the interface. It's going to tell you the name of the brush. It's helpful because there's a lot of brushes, and sometimes, you know, the icons don't give you the most information. So I'm going to start with a good old Sculpt Draw brush, and the whole purpose behind the Sculpt Draw brush is just to push all of the polygons on the surface of our mesh out underneath the brush, okay? So if we start to just left click and drag with our mouse, you can see what I'm doing here. And this is of course not the result that I'm eventually gonna have, but it's a good representation of what the Sculpt Draw brush is gonna do. It's gonna take the shape of the brush and gently push out. Now there's some things in here on all the brushes that are important to remember. Some universal options and modifiers that are kind of go with almost every single brush. Most important is the size of the brush itself, the radius of the brush. Now it's way up here at the top. Right now on my computer it's set to 108 pixels. If you want to go and change it, of course naturally you can just left click and drag on this little slider up here at the top. Or the keyboard shortcut is the F key, SF as in function or February. If you tap the F key, you then can left click and drag inside of your viewport and make the brush whatever size that you want, which is pretty cool. So F again, you can make it small or big, and now you're up and running. I personally am going to be using that little F key shortcut all the time. It's one of my favorites. It makes it go very fast. So if you ever see my brush getting magically bigger or smaller, I've just hit the F key on my keyboard and I'm changing the radius of my brush. In addition to the radius of our brush, if you look right here, we also have some pressure sensitivity. Now it's kind of hard to see on a mesh like this, but the pressure sensitivity is going to allow us to take the pressure sensitivities on my pen tablet here, I'm using a little Wacom tablet, and apply that down on top of our mesh as well, specifically for the radius and for the strength. They both have them. This is the pressure sensitivity icon for both of these. I'm going to leave the strength option on, and let's just talk about strength. This is the intensity that this brush is currently going to be applied down onto our sculpture itself. I'm going to hit the F key, make my brush a little bit smaller. And you can see I'm just doing a very simple line here. Well, if I really drive that strength up, now I'm going to be pushing those polygons much more intensely out inside of the scene itself. Okay, so this is just the overall intensity of that brush, the strength of the brush. Now, this is going to take some customization. You're going to be messing with this all the time. Sometimes when you're laying down strokes and you're sculpting, you go, whoa, that was way too intense. We'll bring down the strength some, and you can start kind of feathering in and lightly layering on some details as you go. Okay, now to the right of the strength option here at the top, we also have this plus and this minus. These are important ones because this is going to determine which direction the draw brush is going to push or pull the polygons. Let me show you specifically what I'm talking about here. If see how it's on the plus sign? Now when I'm using my draw brush, it's pushing the polygons out. Everything's going outwards. Pretty cool. However, if I was to change the option to the minus sign, now it's pushing them all in. So it's an in and an out brush or option. And that's a cool looking shark right there. That's pretty fantastic. So that's what the plus and minus sign do. Now you don't necessarily have to use the plus and minus sign to have the exact same effect on your mesh itself. Okay, there it is, regular kind of plus. If you hold down the control key while you're stroking, it does an interactive switch of that option on the fly. And now you can see that I'm pushing all of those polygons inwards. So the control key, and this is a universal shortcut for all the sculpting tools, is going to have an opposite effect of whatever that brush is. It's going to change this plus and minus sign. Okay, let me hit undo a number of times here, get rid of some of this mumbo jumbo. There we go. Okay, so I'm still in the good old Sculpt Draw brush. It's one of my faves. And I want you to look at some of the options that are in the brush pull-down menu. I'm not going to go through all of these, but it's important to know that we can still continue to refine our brush based off of all of these properties. Experiment, explore. Every single one of you guys is going to be seeing your sculpture and these tools through your own perspective, which is fine. That's part of the artistic process. But know that you can change these tools and how your tools are behaving to get the result that you want. Now, one that I want to make sure that everyone is aware of is this stroke pull-down menu, because there's some really good stuff in here for the stroke, specifically the spacing itself. This is, if you look carefully, now when I stroke, I'm getting a whole bunch of dots. What's going on here is that it is spacing out the stamp head of the brush as it goes along the stroke. Imagine that the computer, whenever we do a stroke on the mesh itself, is stamping a whole bunch of circles down in a row. If this stroke spacing is quite high, the distance between those circles is going to get high. If it's very low, then it's imperceptible. It's just a smooth individual stroke. There's no difference. There's no space between all the little stamps. And at times, adjusting this is really kind of a nice thing to do, because now, check it out. Now I can get a little bit more control over some of those lines and some of those shapes. It's not as jittery. The stroke can be a little bit more smooth. And it's something that I go in, or I find myself going in and changing a little bit here and there. You know, keep it at its default value of 1%, but, you know, adjust it and know that you can adjust it to get a different result. Sometimes the drawing engine is so sensitive that you often get little inconsistent jitters in your strokes itself. Well, this is going to help with that entire process. Okay. Another thing we're going to do, looks like we have barnacles all over my shark. There we go. Another thing that I want you to be aware of is this fall off parameter of all of your brushes. This is going to change the tip shape of your brush itself. And certain times and in certain situations, you're going to want to do this. If I put this to sphere, now it's got a smoother fall off along the sides in comparison to, let's do sharp. And now the peak, there's going to be a much more defined peak along the ridge. Yeah, see how it's a little bit more sharp there at the peak? Yeah, this might not see it on the spine, but it's just changing the shape of our fall off. This is going to be very helpful when we start working with higher resolution sculpts. In this early blockout stage, you know, I just keep it at the default, which is this smooth. That's a good place to begin, but a lot of folks change it. This last thing that I want to show you real fast before we talk about some of the other sculpting brushes is this cursor. And this is just some display properties, totally customizable, up to you to figure out how you want to work with them. There's a couple things in here that at the very least I want you to be aware of. You can display the cursor or not. Some folks just like getting that big circle out of the way. And at times I turn it off because I can't see what I'm sculpting because the interface is physically occluding my view. So display cursor on and off. Another thing that's kind of cool is this fall off opacity. The default is this eye icon, which is not off. It's disabled at the moment. And with it on, now you can actually see the shape of our fall off underneath the cursor. So if you look carefully, you can see the shape of our fall off. It's just a nice, smooth, blurred edge circle. However, if I go into, let's do sharper, you can see that cursor is now changed and updated. This can be helpful. Know that it's there, and I'll let you figure out how you want to work with these tools. So the brushes inside of the sculpting engine in Blender are pretty good. There's a bunch of them. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there are a couple that I want to just touch on. Of course, the Sculpt Draw, and then there's another one that I like, which is clay tubes, or just the clay brush, excuse me. The clay brush is going to allow us to go in. Let me just make my brush a little bit bigger and much stronger. The clay brush is going to allow us to go in and just block out some forms. It's just kind of a great way for us just to go in and just to kind of put some shapes down. It's just think of it kind of, it definitely uses the pressure sensitivity. And I'm going to turn it off just to make it a little bit easier. Yeah, there we go. The pressure sensitivity really make it a way for us to sculpt some form. I'm pressing really hard on my brush right now. And you can see that both the size of the brush and the intensity of the brush change as I press. It's small and then it gets big. I can turn that off here and now it's just taking the shape, okay? All right, so the clay brush is good. It's just a way for us to kind of to block out some overall forms, you'll be seeing me use the clay brush from time to time. Now, probably the most important tool, in addition to some of our sculpting tools, is the smoothing tool. As you can see here on the mesh itself, we have a lot of work that we need to accomplish to get this smooth and starting to look the way we want. The smooth tool is going to even out the surfaces underneath the brush itself. You want to be able to use this as often as you can. See how it's starting to eve out some of those forms. However, the thing that you need to be aware of when it comes to the smooth brush is its strength. Its strength is defaulted to quite high, and I find that that can be pretty destructive. It starts to collapse the shape a little too quickly. Sometimes you just want to feather and smooth, have it just a small fall off here versus a big transition in form with a higher strength. With the smooth brush, you're absolutely going to need to go in and reduce the strength. One addition to the smooth brush, and this is kind of cool, if I go back into Sculpt Draw for a second here, I mentioned earlier that the control key is going to allow us to do the opposite effect of whatever brush that we have applied inside of our toolbar. Same goes with the smooth tool. Check this out. So the control is going to do the opposite, but if we hold down Shift in any brush, it's going to start to smooth out those shapes. And it's going to take the default, or excuse me, it's going to take the values, the strength values of the smooth brush. See how mine's set to 0.3? It's going to take this 0.3 value and apply it whenever I hold down the Shift key and start to smooth it out. Let me show you what I'm talking about a little bit more directly. I'm just going to over crank this value to a value of 1. This is going to completely decimate that area. It's going to smooth out and average all of those surfaces underneath my brush head. So now if I go back to the draw tool and hold down the Shift key, see how it takes the value of whatever the smooth brush strength is? So keep that in mind. If you want to use that Shift key when you're working in the clay brush or the Sculpt Draw brush, go into your smooth brush and just knock this down a little bit. Make it a little bit less intense. I think you're going to find that it's going to be much, much easier to work with. Okay, so the smooth brush is also another good one. I'm going to jump down here to this guy, the grab brush. Now the grab brush is kind of like the move brush. It's going to use the overall shape of your brush size itself, and it's going to allow you to make pretty big sweeping changes. You're going to see me using the grab brush a lot to block out some shapes and to block out some overall forms. It's a fantastic tool to make some wide adjustments to our mesh itself. Now, the problem that people run into when working with the grab brush is when the brush is too small. With it too small, it doesn't have a huge effect and kind of turn our mesh into a whole series of really weird pimples going across the surface. We get a lot of problems when using the grab brush with a small radius. When it's a humongous radius, then it turns into a nice lovely addition, because now I can make some pretty big sweeping changes to my mesh. Maybe I want this fin to be a little bit more curved. There we go, something like that. Now it's kind of reading like a whale at the moment, but that's okay. It's just we're kind of just messing around with some ideas. But the grab brush is going to allow us to just move our polygons around in a little bit more of an organic fashion. Oftentimes, especially in Blender, editing verts can be kind of a headache. With the sculpting tools, especially when paired with a pen and the grab brush, it can be a really kind of a nice little addition to our workflow. Okay, so those are the defaults, or excuse me, those are the basics of working with the brushes inside of the Blender sculpting engine. I think you're really going to find that they're quite good and a powerful addition to our sculpting workflow.